The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has been out for a good while now, and it's been getting me thinking, did Tears of the Kingdom ruin the franchise? Now, I know that sounds bad, and before you click dislike and write your mean and frankly hurtful comments down below, let me explain what I mean by this. Tears of the Kingdom is a 10 out of 10 game, bar none, no questions asked. I don't think anyone's actually debating the actual quality of the game here, but the thing I want to look at most is if Tears of the Kingdom permanently killed off the original format of the 3D Zelda games. That format being the way games were done from Ocarina of Time all the way to Skyward Sword. There are a ton of Zelda fans that are going to grow up with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom as their first Zelda games, and they'll never really have experienced the games prior. And on top of that, Tears of the Kingdom is the fastest selling Zelda game of all time. So does Nintendo really have a reason to go back to the old format? Well, that's what I'm going to be discussing in today's video and more, so if you're enjoying the content, make sure to use the Master Sword and slice the like button in half, and if you really want to save all of Hyrule, make sure to seal the darkness and do the same to the subscribe button as well. Anyway, let's get into it. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild released on March 3rd, 2017 alongside the Nintendo Switch system, and it absolutely changed the gaming landscape forever. Well, about as forever as 2017 can get, but still, the game was vastly different from past Zelda titles, as the last mainline 3D Zelda game we got was Skyward Sword on the Wii. I never got to play Skyward Sword as a kid, but what I can tell you is the critics' views and the fans' views of the games were wildly different. Critics absolutely adored this game from top to bottom, but fans were somewhat mixed on the game upon release, some even calling it bad. This game was the absolute breaking point for Zelda games moving forward, as Skyward Sword pushed the previous formula to its limits, but some not seeing it as such. It's just more the same we've had for years, as some had said. The style had gotten stale, and Nintendo noticed. They didn't want just critics happy, but the fans too. And so, to look for the solution to this growing problem, they went back to the beginning. Breath of the Wild is as close as we're ever gonna get to a 3D remake of the original Zelda. It takes the very foundations of what made the very first game so beloved and brings it to a modern era. It strayed so far from the formula everyone was so used to at the time. Some even refused to call it a Zelda game. Well, I mean, they're obviously wrong, it says it in the title. The world, the story, the freedom the game gave you was absolutely unmatched by anything we had seen before. A perfect showcase of what Nintendo's new handheld could do. It just seemed like the perfect game. There was no way Nintendo was going to top this. Until they did with Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Tears of the Kingdom is such an amazing sequel that it makes Breath of the Wild almost completely irrelevant. If you played Tears of the Kingdom first, well, I'm sorry, you've already experienced Breath of the Wild, but on steroids. You see, Breath of the Wild is like Goku. Tears of the Kingdom is like Gohan, a game with even more potential than its predecessor. The only difference being that Tears of the Kingdom is if Gohan never stopped training. With two games now that have proven more than capable to carry the series to new heights, only one question remains. Did Tears of the Kingdom straight up kill the old way of doing Zelda games? Are we ever going to see another game structured like Ocarina of Time again? Twilight Princess, maybe? To answer this question, let's take a look at the aspects of each formula to see what makes them so different and why we might never see this form of Zelda ever again. Okay, that was a little dramatic. Don't take that seriously. Games like Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess follow a very similar structure. While the stories of the games are wildly different, how you beat each game remains about the same. Set off on the quest, travel across Hyrule and beat the 3 dungeons standing in your way before something comes along and changes the trajectory of your quest so you can beat even more dungeons and eventually save Zelda somehow. There's obviously a lot more that goes into it, but it's relatively the same. Go into the dungeon, find an item, beat the dungeon with the item, rinse and repeat. It sounds kind of boring on paper, but trust me, it's so much fun. I even went on to twitter.com to ask what your guys' thoughts were on the best aspects of traditional 3D Zelda games, and the most responses I got were about the dungeons. Things how like the enclosed temple designs were better structured than in Tears. It was a lot easier to cheese the dungeons due to how much freedom you had and how the dungeons' themes were expanded upon much further in previous games. These games, while they do have some freedom, are very structured and borderline linear to go through. Go here, go do a dungeon, collect things, etc. Tears of the Kingdom, however, is a very different story. The structure of the game is a lot more loose and designs itself around your playstyle. Although Tears' beginning, once you reach the ground, is a lot more linear compared to Breath of the Wild, you are still more than able to just ignore mission objectives and just do whatever you want. Go do a shrine, go build a car, do a dungeon, get the paraglider, kill Ganon the moment you touch the ground, go build a murder drone, go to the farthest reaches of the world simply because you can. There's obviously a story present that feels very urgent, but again, you're more than welcome to just ignore it. The world is so vast and free that it almost feels overwhelming. There's so much to do, so much to find. In games like Ocarina of Time, you couldn't do the shrines in any order like you can in Tears. The game doesn't revolve around what you do, you revolve around the game. The inventory is also also something vastly different from the games prior. In the previous 3D Zelda games, Link's always had a set of inventory items that you would collect throughout the game and would be guaranteed to be used for puzzles somewhere in a dungeon or out in the overworld. Items like the hook shot and the gale shot are items that you find halfway through dungeons, and it would help you complete puzzles you otherwise couldn't do before. There were some items that weren't puzzle focused as well that you could find, mainly through side quests such as the bottles and upgrades to your pouch, letting you hold more rupees. Each item in your inventory had some kind of purpose that allowed you to move forward in the game. So what's the inventory like in the new games, you might ask? Ooh, a stick. Ooh, a mushroom. Ooh, an old man. The inventories in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are wildly expansive, and there isn't really any set thing that helps you progress throughout the game. The only set items each player is forced to get throughout each of their playthroughs are the Sheikah Slate abilities and the hand runes in Tears of the Kingdom. Otherwise, every single item you pick up is worth way less than the handcrafted inventory of the previous games. Tears of the Kingdom actually did this better, however, with the fuse mechanic, being able to fuse pretty much anything together for some crazy effects. This makes your inventory management far more useful now, as you actually get to use a lot of items and minerals you otherwise would only use in Breath of the Wild for, say, cooking. Nintendo went as far as to completely remove arrows with status effects from the game as to get you to fuse items together to create your own arrows with these same effects. Back in Breath of the Wild, once I got so powerful, I never really needed to cook anything, so all the monster parts I collected amounted to pretty much nothing, and they just kept stacking in my inventory. There was simply no use for them. Nothing I could really do other than use them for potions, which I didn't need. Here in Tears of the Kingdom, it's a very different story. Due to the fuse mechanic, my inventory is usually very low on some monster parts and even fruit because of how often I use fuse on these things. The fuse mechanic alone completely changes the inventory game, and I can see why Nintendo took the extra year to polish this game up, because it feels like it would be super easy to screw all of it up. While Zelda games of the past have very specific inventory built for the game itself, I really enjoy Tears' absolute freedom of expression that comes with managing your items, being able to use whatever you want for some crazy effects. Sure, you have some of the same weapons as previous Zelda games, your sword, bow, shield, and whatnot, but here, combat feels so fresh, being able to fuse everything together to create like a diamond sword or an arrow that confuses the enemy. There's positives and negatives to both sides of the coin here, but I can see why some people would prefer the old style over what we have currently. Although personally, while I love both playstyles, I absolutely adore the wonder and mystery that came with seeing Tears' world for the very first time. Nothing will capture my awe and wonder upon seeing the title screen like Tears did. Knowing that everywhere I go, there's something to do or find is an absolute treat. Being able to build almost whatever monstrosity I want, I've just never seen it before, and I don't think it can ever be properly replicated. The real question, the main crux of talking about all of this is, will Nintendo ever return to the old format of Nintendo games? Do they have a reason outside of nostalgia from older fans to remastering old titles? There's no real way to answer that, as Nintendo is very, very unpredictable when it comes to their games, especially with Zelda. They like to innovate, to create new gaming experiences we haven't seen before, so the future, at least in my opinion, is very uncertain as to if we'll ever see, a Hyrule like these old games again. Due to the immense success of Tears of the Kingdom, some even calling it the greatest of all time, there's a very good chance that every major Zelda game going forward will see a similar format of doing things, of how you explore, of how you fight. Something I know that for sure is, but we probably won't be seeing a third game featuring this current cast we know and love. Next game will probably be something completely different from what we know and are used to, and I personally welcome it. Maybe some smaller Zelda releases could feature the old style of game, whether it be a remaster of some old titles or a brand new game, but I can't see them straight up downgrading how they did things with Tears of the Kingdom, but who knows? This is all just speculation. Don't really take anything I have to say for real. I just wanted to make this video to put my thoughts out there, as this question has really been weighing on my mind lately, but otherwise that's gonna do it from me. Let me know down in the comments below what you would like to see from a future game, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video, ladies and gentlemen.
Actually, I would like to see from the end game for